One of the things a lot of people worry about before joining a new company is what the culture of that company is. What's it like to work at Microsoft or McKinsey? What are the positives of working at a huge global firm or some little local company? Well, I'm Mike. I've got 25 years background in business from pharma, tech, and consulting. I've held C-level roles in international companies. I have degrees in business, human resources, and psychology. And on this channel, I cover business and careers. I analyze and pick apart why companies do the things they do. And I provide advice on careers and navigating the corporate world. Today, I'm running you through a guide on how to better gauge the working style, the environment, or if you prefer the term, the culture of a given company. Let's get stuck in. I considered whether I should lead with this or end with this, and I'm leading. No matter the company, the two most important things that define your working experience will be your manager and the team you work most closely with. A reasonably good boss and some non-toxic co-workers are going to be the main factor determining how you experience working at a company. A good manager can insulate you from corporate nonsense. A bad manager can micromanage you and literally drive you towards burnout. A lot of people worry so much about what the company is like, and it is important. That's what this guide is for. But that boss and those colleagues, they are what can make and break your day-to-day work happiness. Size. Check out the size of the company in terms of number of employees. The reason? Complexity, process. Any company that grows needs some things to continue to be efficient, and usually those goals of efficiency take the shape of processes and bureaucracy. A lot of people see bureaucracy as a bad thing, but it really isn't. Consider a small company of 25 people. Somebody has an idea to launch a marketing campaign. What do? They go to the CEO and they say, dude, I've got this idea. They hash it out a bit and they agree, let's go. From there, you grab a colleague and you start putting together the actual campaign together and you launch it fairly quickly. You can't really do that in Microsoft. The odds of you just rocking up at the office of Satya Nadella and saying, dude, I've got this banging idea are just not great. Also, your campaign isn't going to be a $1,000 investment. You're likely thinking of spending millions, and big old Microsoft wants to understand the potential ROI. From finance controlling to recruitment processes to software development approval gates, a bigger company is going to, all other things being equal, have more rules, more processes, and more control mechanisms. Now, you're likely reacting to this, and some of you are thinking, my lord, that sounds like hell on earth. It sounds slow and cumbersome, and you're hearing the word bureaucracy and thinking, no. But this is where you have to know that what is one person's meat is another person's poison. For some people, those large firms do have what feels like slower and more restrictive processes, but generally speaking, getting things right in the sense of really doing the groundwork is a positive of all those processes. It's also going to be typical that there's more emphasis on stakeholder management, complex project management. It's often going to feel more professional. Also, the sheer scale of the things you work on will tend to be bigger. In a small company, the opposite is going to be true. Decisions get made fast, but you know what the downside is. Mistakes are made more often. It's often a little more half-assed because over-engineering things is not going to help this company. It's also potentially massively chaotic. You show up at a small startup on the Monday and you have one priority. Show up on Tuesday and somebody changed that priority. That dynamic environment is likely just too chaotic and unpredictable for some people. There's no right or wrong. One is not better or worse. Different sizes of companies need different things, and the odds of a company the size of Amazon being run like a 50-man business are small. The kind of chaos and disorganization that is needed to have the dynamic of a startup can destroy a 100,000-person company. If you're still here, then you're likely enjoying this video. If so, then click the subscribe button. It tells me that I'm making content that resonates with you and is hugely appreciated. Thanks a ton. I can't run you through every single industry in the world, so I'll take three: logistics, tech, and pharmaceuticals. What's worth noting about pharmaceuticals? It's a regulated industry with a ton of government oversight. It's knowledge intensive. You need a lot of PhD types of people that really understand what they're working with. And it takes a long time to develop a product with sometimes a decade of research before a product even makes it to production. Consider what those three things mean for the company culture. Government oversight means rules. It means process documentation. It means compliance. There are rules in place to ensure that you don't make some pill that ends up killing people. Rules, documentation, compliance. Does that sound like a fast-moving environment where you're going to be hiring people who make quick, high-risk decisions? No. Because it's a knowledge-intensive and complex industry, you're likely also going to be required to be very thorough. Decisions are not being made based on quick hallway discussions. Things are thoroughly researched, discussed, and reviewed before decisions are made. Also, there's no rush. Research takes time. I remember speaking to a CRO at a large pharmaceutical firm once, and he said his researchers spent 99% of their time looking for faults, looking to fail. It wasn't about seeing if the product worked. That to him was the easy part. The hard part was ensuring that the product didn't have any adverse effects and sorting those out so they didn't get through. What about tech giants? Again, knowledge intensive, you need really smart people. It's largely unregulated, it's high growth and high revenue. Research cycles tend to be shorter, and the priority is often to get to the market first with the minimum viable product and iterate from there. Tech, compared to pharma, is going to be much faster moving, much more open to risk, much more chaotic. The emphasis on skill, the emphasis on technical knowledge is going to be high as well. Smart people are going to be listened to, but as opposed to pharma, the approval cycles will tend to be shorter because the priority is to get to the market faster. Slow approval processes are something they're going to want to avoid. It's no coincidence that a lot of tech firms like Facebook have values like move fast and break things. Depending on the tech they're working with, there's also going to be more chaos and more dynamic decision making. Pharma does shut down research projects, but you don't have the same scenarios like Google that regularly open and close new ideas, shuttering entire projects, what feels like from one day to the next. Now, logistics. Hopefully I'm not hurting any logistics people's feelings, but it's not a PhD kind of environment. It is, however, an environment massively focused on optimization. Getting stuff from A to B and packing a ship or a truck optimally with goods can make or break your margins. Delivery times, service level agreements, all that kind of stuff, hugely important. So it's practical. Go to any logistics company and most of them are going to be incredibly data driven. They are also typically very strong on process because these are companies that are constantly tweaking processes to maximize profitability. Despite them sometimes being gargantuan in size, they usually excel at being incredibly efficient. But they do like reports and spreadsheets and dashboards showing red and yellow and green of every step of a given process. If you're a super nerdy and researchy kind of person, this environment is going to be far too practical and action-based for you. But if you like fixing things in real time, that's the kind of employee they'll likely be wanting. Now, here's an important thing. The core of the business is always going to be the one that defines all other departments. If you're in finance in pharma, you're going to be expected to be knowledgeable, risk-averse, and slow-moving as well. If you're in procurement team of a logistics company, they are going to expect you to be practical and efficient and data-driven. The point is that all industries have a nature to them which is defined by the thing they make and the customer they serve. Take any industry or sector. Don't revert to stereotyping, but consider what the nature of the industry is. Is it fast-moving or slow? Is it regulated or not? Is it risk-averse or risk-seeking? Is it knowledge-intensive or action-intensive? Is it a private citizen consumer or another company? Is the product a commodity or a luxury? Think of this example. What's it like to work for the watchmaker Rolex? Slow-moving, luxury, attention to detail, high value. That's the product. What do you think it means as a workplace? Slow-moving, attention to detail, high value. I've worked for Japanese firms, German firms, American firms, Danish firms. Where the headquarter is makes a difference. European firms are led in a markedly different fashion than US firms. For those of you that, like me, have worked for a Japanese conglomerate, then you know the term nemawashi. Either you love nemawashi or you hate nemawashi, but you know what I'm talking about. At a macro level, these cultural norms that originate from a given country's culture will affect the culture of the companies. Obviously, I can't go through a whole anthropological run-through of the differences between every single country in the world, but I do have one little example. Denmark and Sweden, both Scandinavian countries. As an American or Brit, you might think they're the same, right? Well, no. Ask any Dane, and he'll say Swedish business people can't make a decision. Ask a Swede about Denmark and they'll say Danes are unreliable. These are obviously stereotypes, but they speak to a core of some things that define Swedish and Danish work culture. Swedes, for historical reasons, tend to be incredibly focused on consensus. They will delay any decision until such time that everybody agrees. You cannot force a Swede to do something they do not want to do, and you don't know it because they will avoid any upfront confrontation. This makes for an environment that can initially feel really slow-moving, But once they do agree, they tend to move really fast and they rarely hit any obstacles on the way because everybody's on board. Now, as Danes, we change our minds constantly. We openly disagree much more than Swedes, and it makes us good traders and businessmen. It makes us good buyers and sellers. We're much more pragmatic, which to the Swedes comes across as unreliable. Our work environment tends to be far more pragmatic. One thing we do have in common, though, is our companies are often highly values-based and tend to have some strong principles for right or wrong, which overrule, often, short-term profit motives. Listed, private equity held, owner-led. The ownership model is going to make a difference on the culture. A listed company is going to be exactly as you expect, especially if the CEO is paid in equity. Focus is going to be on shareholder value. It's going to be, in part, on appeasing the markets. That will have an effect on things like hiring and firing and hiring freeze and mandates and all that kind of stuff. If you're in a private equity held company, you know that this company is there to be sold within 4 to 7 years, ideally faster. So what is private equity going to do? They're going to cut costs. They're going to make impactful decisions in a very short period of time. They're going to optimize for the short-term balance sheet, and they're going to bolt on subsidiaries. They're going to be constantly slicing the cake to make it look appealing to potential buyers. Compare, for example, In-N-Out Burger to McDonald's. McDonald's is listed. In-N-Out is privately held and family run. What defines In-N-Out? They've expanded slower. They've taken on less risk. The customer experience as a whole is more consistent. Think of another owner-led company. Facebook to this day is very, in part, a reflection of Mark Zuckerberg. Tesla is not quite owner-led, but it is in part a reflection of Elon Musk, who is the by far majority shareholder. A small startup with the owner at the helm are almost entirely defined by the personality of the founder. If the founder is a raging psychopath, then you're likely stepping into a toxic working environment. A regular CEO does also define the culture of a company, but the owner-led company is different. Apple is, of course, a little bit different under Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. They are different men with different priorities, different strengths and weaknesses, but the owner-led company amps the effect of the CEO up to 11. And this is simply because somebody can fire Tim Cook. Investors can get rid of him. No one can get rid of the owner, which means the amount of power the owner has is that much greater. This applies to consulting and audit and law firms as well. Partnerships are multiple owner-led companies. There's a reason why audit, consulting, and law firms often have a reputation of having super toxic working environments. It's because it's owner-led and the owners have power. If you're the biggest fee earner partner at your local law firm, you can do whatever you want because the other partners don't want to lose the business you're generating for the firm. That's why these companies often have many more stories of harassment and other abuses of power. There are fewer checks and balances in the way there are in listed companies. Here's a question. What would it be like to work at Berkshire Hathaway? Well, look at Warren Buffett. Then you know. You really need to understand the ownership structure of a business. Startup, scale up, established, decline. Startups need to move fast. They need to break things and take chances. There's a need to take more risk, and they're not going to be looking for staff that want to implement processes and approvals. Getting stuff done is more important than what you're actually good at. That gives you opportunities to try new things, but it's not exactly an environment that's predictable. Today, you're head of finance. Yesterday, you were area sales manager, and tomorrow, you are the product optimization lead. Some people love that dynamic. Others will find it unsettling. The more established company is, by its very nature, going to be stable, more predictable, but also potentially more boring for some people. Usually the stage correlates with size, but it doesn't always. Not every company ends up being the size of Google. Some companies top out at 400 people and are settled at that size. I would bet, though, that a company of 400 people that has been around for 50 years is going to be culturally more stable, deliberate, and organized than a company of 400 people that has been around for 3 years. Profit. Go to any company and look at their growth rate and their profit compared to their competitors. Are they doing better or worse than the competitors? If they're doing better, the culture is going to be more open to new ideas, it's going to be more open to risk, it's going to be more stable because the money is there. If the numbers are under comparable competitors, the risk is that there's more cost-cutting, of course, which leads to more nervousness, more risk aversion, more politics, and more resource guarding. In the extreme of companies that are not profitable at all, you're going to more often than not see more dissatisfaction and more infighting in leadership. Now, before you think, I just need to go to the biggest and most profitable company because that's where the culture is best, think again. Because you need to consider the competitive situation. And consider Amazon. Amazon are more or less globally dominant in terms of their fulfillment services. On paper, that makes them hugely successful. It makes them a company that a lot of other companies want to be like. But critics would say that they burn out their employees. They would say they have a brutal approach to headcount, cutting far more aggressively than most other companies. Dominant companies can potentially have a very my way or the highway approach, driven by a belief that what they are doing must be right, which leads to something that some people perceive as arrogance or superiority. In industries with high levels of competition, the focus on the employee often tends to be higher. Why? Because there's more competition for talent. If you are the only game in town, odds are you're going to behave as if you are the only game in town as an employer. McKinsey is a good example of status. I know enough McKinsey people to know that they, as a culture, essentially talk about themselves as hot shit. And honestly, there's a fair case for that. When a company needs a tier 1 consulting firm, they don't call Deloitte. Sorry, Deloitte, they're calling McKinsey. For some future employees, this is incredibly attractive. It's a culture of like-minded, ambitious spirits. For other people, what they see is arrogance and out-of-touchness. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's just perception. Reality, though, is that companies that are high status will tend to amplify that high status self-perception internally. This can take different shapes, and not every company that is attractive and high status acts in the same way. But, just consider this. Is the gaming industry highly attractive for young people? Yes. What's common in gaming? People being underpaid and being expected to be grateful for working with game design. Crunch time was basically invented as a toxic concept because of the gaming industry. Is investment banking highly attractive and high paying? Yes. Do they expect you to work till you drop? Yes. What about NGOs? NGOs can often be quite challenging to work in. Why? Because the mission is more important than your personal needs. The stories you hear of toxic work environments in NGOs are rife. Obviously, I'm stereotyping a bit and over-exaggerating, but status affects the working environment because it shapes the story the company and the employees tell about itself. Age. 2 examples. Amazon has a cloud solution and is a tech company. Microsoft has a cloud solution and it is a software or tech company. Microsoft in the US is known for having excellent dental, excellent health insurance, family coverage, low deductibles, limited copays. Amazon, on the other hand, is known for really high salaries and free pizza. In a super simplified fashion, the difference is the age of the employees. Those mid-40s Microsoft people don't want to hang around for foosball on a Friday. They don't care about free pizza anymore. They want to do their job and they want to go home. The younger Amazon people would likely die over at Microsoft. It's been a couple of years, but I was over at Microsoft's Redmond headquarters pre-COVID. The conference center there is brilliant. The cyber intrusion display was amazing, but the offices, they were calm, toned down. There was very little vibe. Now, I've never been to an Amazon office, but I've been to a Google office, and the Google office, which also has a higher proportion of younger people than Microsoft, is much more energetic and vibrant. It caters to younger people with a whole set of different priorities. Because of the type of employees Microsoft have, it's going to emphasize a culture of stability, where Amazon, all things being equal, is going to emphasize change and adaptation. Incidentally, this is also going to be amplified by the fact that Microsoft is locked into their own tech stack, where Amazon, by definition, is more or less stack agnostic. That also impacts the dynamic of the working environment. Who's the customer? Is it consumers, businesses, or governmental? Governmental customers are slow-moving and, relatively speaking, bureaucratic. Consumers are fast-moving and highly critical. Business customers emphasize long-term relationships and loyalty. By now, you should be able to do this analysis yourself. How does working with governmental, slow-moving and bureaucratic entities affect the culture dynamic of the company? If you're working at a law firm whose primary customers is individual citizens and litigation, the culture of that company is going to be very different from a law firm whose primary job is advising businesses on how to work with governmental procurement procedures. Both law firms, but hugely different. Now you can think it through yourself. You can do the analysis. Those are the dimensions: size, industry, country, ownership model, stage, profit, growth, age, competition, status, and customer. These are the 10 things you can research about a company to get a feel for what kind of a culture you're dealing with. A local American restaurant is small in a low-margin industry that's highly competitive in a country with a fairly hierarchical leadership style. The owner is also going to, in large part, define the working culture. Most people are going to be younger. The customer is a highly critical consumer, all too ready to give you a 1-star Yelp review. What kind of culture does that potentially foster? Pace, action, pressure. There's nowhere you can hide. Now, Tesla, it's automotive tech in the US. It's technically a listed company, but it has more or less been owner-led by Elon Musk. Right now, they are massively struggling due to the antics of their owner. It's knowledge and optimization intensive. Generally, people are going to be a little bit younger, and the customer is a hyper-fickle, regular consumer. Now, some people will hear all that and think, wow, fast-paced, dynamic, high pressure. Growth and learning environment is likely what it is. But someone else will read pressure, burnout, toxic culture, questioning of skills, declining business. Both are potentially correct answers. And they're correct answers because, as if you listen to me, you've reacted to what I've said. When I said Microsoft and locked into their tech stack, some of you thought, cool, I get to be good at this one thing and get to focus. Where others, they thought, that sounds limiting. Why would I want to be locked into one stack? I want options to try new things and be challenged with new technologies. The point is, how you perceive these elements will depend on what speaks to you. Some of you will hear bureaucracy and think inefficiency. Others will hear the same word and hear accuracy, consistency, and reliability. Startups are also not inherently toxic. You see these videos of people saying, don't go to a startup or scale up until the grown-ups have arrived. And I just don't agree. It's horses for courses. Some people love precisely the startup culture. It's for them, and maybe it's not for you. Switching jobs can be a nightmare. You're never really entirely sure what you're stepping into, but these 10 factors are an excellent starting point to gauge what you're getting. Just remember that those factors make up 49% of the working experience. The remaining 51% is down to your manager and the team you'll be working closest with. Hopefully you found this helpful. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to subscribe. See you soon.